Hello, my name is Sandra and welcome back to my channel. So today we're talking about another one of my literary obsessions, and it's autofiction. So as you guys know, as soon as I love something, you guys need to hear about it. Autofiction is not something new that I love, but I have been seeing more and more content that is geared towards autofiction. So it seems to me beyond the academic world, it is getting traction into, our spaces, and there's a lot more to be developed and to be imagined in the space, but we will get to that later. Right now, I want to talk about what is autofiction. I want to go through the 3 main characteristics you might find in an autofiction novel, and then I also want to recommend 5 autofiction books for you guys to get started. Without further ado, let's start. So like I mentioned, in the last few years, especially the last 2 decades, autofiction has garnered a lot of attention and also a lot of criticism. Some people love the style while other people absolutely loathe it. Love it or hate it, it's a practice that many authors engage in when they first start writing and that they return to once they have mastered their writing. The term autofiction itself was coined in 1977 by Serge Dubrovsky regarding his novel called Fils, which means son in French. And yet, many scholars claim that we can trace autofiction all the way back to the poet Sappho. And this is mostly due to her confessional lyricism and the use of the first-person I in her poetry. Honestly, I'm not here to debate autofiction, I'm just here to spread the love and the awareness of the style. And so, some of you may still ask, but what is autofiction? I gave you a little bit of background. Let's talk about what exactly is autofiction. So autofiction is a literary style that combines autobiography and fiction. Simple? Yes. Complicated? Also yes. It's important to know that it's not yet recognized as a genre, so many of the books that are autofictional novels will be classified in the fiction section. In the end, it is the blur, or as I like to call it, the waltz between fact and fiction that creates the essential beauty of the autofiction style. I do believe that we're soon entering a new side of autofiction where the fictionalized aspects of the autobiographical story can go beyond contemporary fiction. So what do I mean by that? So for example, you might want to write a story about your upbringing, right, which is basically autobiographical, but you're determined to set your story in space. Or maybe you decide in a Kafkaesque twist that you are a fly on the wall watching yourself transition in the many periods of your life, and that is your autofiction book. In the end, events, characters, and settings can be both fictional and factual. So you can have a blend of fabricated and realistic real material. And like I said, we have yet to see autofiction transgress further genres. So as it stands, autofiction mostly remains in the realm of realism. And therefore, autofiction sticks to contemporary fiction as much as possible in hopes to keep as much as the realistic events, characters, and settings. I think the fear here is that if it becomes too abstract or if it blends too many genres, people might forget that it has autobiographical merits. So now, what are the 3 main common characteristics of the autofiction novel? First, we have embellishments. We have shared name between narrator and author. Then we also have metafiction. Here, it's important to remember that the authors are definitely going to embellish their stories. If not, it would not be autofiction, but they may choose to change the main character's name, or they may even not concern themselves too much with the metafiction portion. Now let's further break down these characteristics that I talked about. So remember, the first characteristic is embellishment, and it's probably the most important characteristic in my opinion. So back in 2020, I started to write my own autofiction novel, and I was writing it about my university experience because in 2020 I was completing my master's, so I had already done 4 years of undergrad. I had already learned about autofiction. I was really into the genre, more so back then than I am now, and I decided that I wanted to write about my university experience, but I didn't want it to be like a memoir or a biography strictly said. So I decided to use my experiences and break it down into 4 to 5 characters. So most of what happened is true, but the embellishment remains in the fact that I'm not the only person telling the story. I'm telling the story to 5 separate characters. Essentially, the whole is based on a true story, but with creative liberty. So my characters, they go to depression, hospitalization, near academic suspension. They go from a 1.7 GPA to a 3.7 GPA. They get a position at a master's degree, etc. Basically, there's a clear narrative and academic arc that reflects almost exactly my life with certain liberties. Usually these embellishments serve the author's message. Oftentimes they are both symbolic and thematic. So for me, for example, why I split up these characters, why not just tell my story, is because it's more interesting that way, first of all, and second of all, I could really focus on one struggle at a time versus putting them all in one person. And also I like working with fiction more than I like working with memoirs or biographies. Now say, let's go back to the space example that I brought up earlier. Maybe you write about your upbringing in space to highlight how alien you feel in this world or how isolated you felt growing up. Maybe your corner of space represents the reality of the small oppressive town you grew up in. So as you can see, these embellishments serves both the narrative and the author's message. The second characteristic, like I mentioned, is a shared name between the author and the main character. Sometimes you'll find a main character that remains unnamed, so we're either led to believe that they don't have a name, that their name is not that important, that their identity is being erased, or that they are literally just a stand-in for the author. It's kind of the same collapse that we see in poetry, and that's why a lot of scholars think that Sappho is the first example that we got from autofiction. Sometimes the author might even choose to use a nickname. So for example, when I was a flight attendant, I used to go by the name of Alex. So if I ever was to write a autofiction novel about being a flight attendant and, crafting a story around that, I'll most likely use the name Alex. I will not use my main name, which is Sandra. And now the final and third characteristic is metafiction. Since the story is mainly about the author's life in a fictional context, it is no surprise that most authors use metafiction while writing their autofiction novel. Because the main character becomes a stand-in for the author, we often witness this main character finding their voice or crafting their story in real time. We watch as they grapple with their identity, new or old, as a writer, artist, filmmaker, playwright, journalist, etc. Much like we would read an autobiography by an author, this is the same concept at play here. So for example, in the book itself, the author character might be working on a book, discussing literature, attending literature or writing classes, reading books, or passing commentary on the socio-political landscape of their inner and outer world through books, writing, or discussion of real or imagined events. In this way, the use of metafiction further exaggerates the author's playful awareness of the boundaries between fiction and reality. 10 years ago, in a 2014 article for Flavor Wire, Jonathan Sturgeon writes, "The best way I can describe the new autofictional novel, the œuvre is the soul. The artist's body of work, in other words, has come to replace the religious ideal of the immortal spirit. This is why the Künstlerroman has become the weapon of choice for many of our most committed novelists. The story of the maturation of the artist or the creation of a work of fiction is tantamount to the unfurling of the soul on the page." The German term Künstlerroman translates to artist novel in English. As Sturgeon explained, these types of novel depicts the growth and maturity of the artist, much like the Bildungsroman, which is the coming-of-age novel. And this is the same reason why a lot of readers and critics dislike the autofiction style of writing, because its self-awareness can be read as self-indulgence and sometimes as a covert aggrandization of one's life. In the end, we like what we like and we relate to what we relate to. There are some autofiction books that I absolutely love, and there are some that I'm totally indifferent to or dislike even. Either way, I hope I've made you curious about this style of writing, and you may have read a book on this style without knowing so in the past, because like I said, it is a style that a lot of authors and a lot of people have used consciously or unconsciously before. Now I have 5 autofiction novels that I want to recommend. These are fairly quick novels to read, and I'm pretty sure you've heard of at least one of them or maybe all of them, and these are normally typically the ones that people recommend. I know that they are digestible but also delectable, so I'm going to present them in no particular order, and I'll give you just one line synopsis. If ever you want to go see what the whole book is about, you can always go check the description. I'll link the books down below. So this is just to get you started, like an appetizer, and maybe if you like the style of writing, you will pick up more autofiction novels. I will definitely make a separate video about French autofiction novels that I love and English autofiction novels that I love and future autofiction books that I want to read as well. So the first one here I have is Les Années, which is The Years by Annie Ernaux, and the reason why I'm starting with this one is just because it's the only French one that I've decided to include today, and this is pretty much the one that everyone refers to when they talk about autofiction. Annie Ernaux is a memoirist, but she also really loves to write autofiction novels. So I have studied her extensively, both for my undergrad and my graduate degrees in my French literature classes. If you ever want to read some autofiction, you should definitely pick up some Annie Ernaux. And this one, The Years, covers 6 decades, from 1941 to 2006. It is Ernaux's rich and impersonal autobiography and collective memory of France through photographs, songs, logos, slogans, and more. And Annie Ernaux won 2022 Nobel Prize for Literature. So autofiction is making more rounds than we think. The next book I want to recommend is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This follows 19-year-old Esther Greenwood, who's awarded a spot at a literary magazine during the summertime. However, Esther is clinically depressed, and we basically watch her rapid descent into mental illness. I actually read Sylvia Plath's journals before reading The Bell Jar a few years back, and it is quite evident that the story of Esther is largely based on Sylvia Plath's life and struggles. And this is further confirmed because The Bell Jar was released around the same time that Sylvia Plath took her life, which is very unfortunate. But again, like I said, the similarities between Esther and Sylvia are way too uncanny and way too personal for it to not be an autofiction novel. Then we have The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie, and this one is a young adult book. This story follows Junior, who is a talented 14-year-old Native American cartoonist. Junior is bullied by his peers at the white high school he attends, which is a high school he chose to go to away from the reservation which he grew up in because he wanted to read good literature and he wanted to get a good education. The fun part about this book is that you could actually see the cartoons as you're reading the book. There are some very heavy topics in this book, and this book is constantly banned and challenged, so I think now more than ever it is really important to read it and to, enjoy it and see the great value that this brings to our society and to our kids. So highly recommend this one. I thought I'd include that one in there. And I'm sure you've heard of this one, which is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, a novel by Ocean Vuong. This is an epistolary novel written by a young American son nicknamed Little Dog, addressed to his illiterate Vietnamese mother. This story is basically based on Ocean Vuong's life and experiences, and I highly recommend it. And if you've not read it yet, this is your time to pick it up. It's also very deeply poetic and moving, and this is just one of my favorite novels of all time. The last book I want to recommend is How Should a Person Be by Sheila Heti, who is a Canadian Torontonian author that I highly recommend, and she's also another figure that typically writes autofiction novels. So like I said, this is another fictionalized autobiography in which a newly divorced Sheila, who is the main character and playwright, contemplates how should a person live and create as an artist. This novel includes taped conversations and emails with her artist friends Marjo, who is actually a real artist. You can go and Google her after you read this book. And also Sheila Heti uses creative liberty, where in some cases she actually uses the play format to continue her narrative between her and Marjo. So like I said, this makes for a very experimental and interesting read, and I highly recommend it. So that concludes the 5 autofiction novels I think you should start with, and that concludes also the topic of what is autofiction. I hope that I covered it sufficiently enough. Honestly, there is a lot to cover, but also not a lot, because the fact of the matter is that autofiction is a unstable category or writing style, whatever you want to call it. It is not yet in genre. Maybe one day we will see autofiction as a recognized subgenre, but as it stands now, I don't see that happening. And many people also argue that that's probably not going to happen. But it doesn't stop writers from engaging with this writing style. I do believe autofiction brings forward some amazing experimental and beautiful fiction out there. So that's why I wanted to make a quick video on it. And like I said, I will revisit autofiction again in later videos. But for now, let me know, what do you think? Have you read any autofiction novels before? Are you interested now in reading any autofiction novels? Like I said, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but you might as well try it before you knock it. And that's it for me today. I will be filming my next autofiction video, which is going to be the 5 autofiction books that I want to read next. There is a nice mixture between English and French books. So if you'd like to accumulate more recommendations, stick around for that video. Hit like and subscribe. I love to have new people here. I love to have people that like and dislike autofiction. I don't care. For me, you like what you like and you hate what you hate. And that's pretty much the mantra that I have discovered. I am a person that really enjoys literature in all of its many aspects, experimental and not so experimental. I love to see authors subvert genres. I love to see authors take risks. Let me know some of your favorite autofiction novels, and I'll see you on the next bookish video. Bye!